your 30% deposit, everyone asks, just isn't enough. Okay, because someone will find the money.
What is enough?
It's got to be a minimum of 40%, in my opinion.
Minimum.
Okay, but it's at a level where someone within the congregation will remortgage their home or do something to make up the shortfall. So someone's going to come up with the cash. So if you're standing there with 200-300 grand and you got your bank offer, it's just not going to close it.
What's been the atmosphere? What's been the sort of mentality of your members? Are you guys doing something? Is there a new energy that's hit the church now that you've acquired? Because this is a major goal, a major accomplishment for them.
It is. And especially in UK, you don't get lots of churches buying their own property. Sometimes when your time is up and God wants to do something for you, he just brings you to the person who will in turn help you to get what you need to get to where you have to. Yes, we had the finances. Everything was in order. But yes, what if something happened?
Welcome to the Business of Church podcast. As you know, I'm Des Stewart.
And I'm Corey Belfon.
And we love bringing you these podcasts. Typically, we want to show you where church and faith meets business and business acumen. And we always bring the best people on to try and help that happen. This morning, we have a great couple of guests. One in particular is Alex Dawson. Yeah, won't forget that again. I'm sure all of you pastors that are watching this, certainly those who've been involved in trying to find buildings and trying to find places of worship, would certainly have met him. And if you haven't, then he's certainly your guy. So we'll be talking some more. But we also have a lovely pastor with us as well this day, and Pastor Priscilla Asibey.
Hi.
Okay, from the which church is it?
International Gospel of Truth Church.
IGTC UK.
Thank you very much. Welcome with us today, and really glad to have you.
Thank you.
Again, as we've mentioned, that this is the Business of Church podcast, and really what we try to do is sort of say, look, you know, we understand faith and everything is great. And that's the very foundation on which, you know, church is built and all of our worship and everything else. But we also have to consider, how do we actually run our churches in terms of the finances and the day-to-day and so on. One of the key things that we're going to be looking at today is the journey that you've taken, certainly, in terms of purchasing a church. Something that, well, I think pretty much almost every week we're speaking to pastors who are they want to purchase a church. In actual fact, having church buildings is one of the hardest things. But thankfully, you guys are here and you're going to show us how something like that is going to be made possible.
Indeed. So before we kick off, let me just introduce Alex more formally. So Alex Dawson of Alex Martin Commercial.
Correct.
Alex is the founder and director of Alex Martin Commercial, which was founded in 2010. He specializes in assisting faith-based groups secure and acquire church buildings. So that's what he does. And let's informally introduce you, Priscilla. Let me get this here. Okay. So Priscilla Asibey, International Gospel of Truth Church, is an investment analyst with a background in portfolio and fund management, financial analyst and modeling, and M&A and real estate projects. Deputy Head Treasury Operations Department at Ghana International Bank.
Correct.
And wife of Pastor Sylvester Opoku Manu, who has been in ministry for over 17 years.
Yes.
Came to the UK in 2012, registered the church, International Gospel of Truth Church, as a charity in 2013. They have a congregation of about 200 people, is that right? And purchased their building via Alex in August 2023 and moved in October.
That's right.
Okay. So almost a year ago, yeah?
Yeah, about 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
August, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll say this.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's funny, actually. Most of the churches won't have that level of expertise that you have. So let's put that out there straight away. Yeah. So no doubt that was a godsend. Literally.
Indeed.
So, tell us about the collaboration. How did you guys come together? How did you meet?
Well, I'll let Priscilla say, but I've known Priscilla for getting on 10 years now, and there's been various stepping stones to get to this position of buying a building. So,
Alex, could you just move your mic a little bit closer, or maybe twist your chair, because I'm looking at your level.
There you go.
And I know some good stuff is going to come out of your mouth, so don't miss it.
Yeah.
So you guys met. So carry on.
I mean, we met around 2016 to 2017. We used to be in Boardman House, so we were looking for a property because they wanted to give that whole space to offices. So we had to move. So we went on property hunting and we came across Alex. So I met him at Costa in Stratford. We had a coffee and I took him to my then pastor's office in Stratford, Boardman. Then they had a conversation and we kick on from there. So that's how we met.
Okay. So I guess you faced the challenge that lots of churches face, which is they get a building or somewhere that they can rent or lease for a period. And then eventually the landlord says,
I'm change of use.
Change of use.
So what was the specific change of use?
So the first one was they just didn't want to use it as a hall anymore. They wanted to use it for offices. So we had to move. So we met Alex at that time. Then we wanted to purchase some property. There was this property in South Woodford. We did back and forth bidding and it didn't fall through. So we got a property to rent actually at Forest Gate.
Okay.
Then Forest Gate, we met this estate agent who said he was going to help us, blah, blah, blah. He made us spend a lot of money because the use wasn't a D1 use. It was A3. He said, don't worry, I deal with this. I'm going to get a council. We're going to put a permission in and you're going to get it. We spent a lot of money.
Sorry, you mentioned A3, just for the listeners.
So A3 is like probably a property for restaurants and the rest.
Right.
But he was saying that he's going to get D1, which is a faith of worship. It's like church. So he said he was going to help us get that.
Okay.
So he told you if you do. So you was renting it and using it for church purposes, but it was an A1 building.
So it was an A3 building.
So A3, yeah.
So it was vacant.
Right.
Then he said, "Oh, this is A3 building, but we can just put a permission in for you to get a D1." So before we actually moved in, because we were desperate and we were being kicked out. So before we moved in, he said, I've put in the permission and everything. And we thought everything was in order. So he's put in the permission. So we came in, we refurbished the property. And we spent a lot of money in that property. And after some couple of months, then the council said, no, I mean, we are not giving you the D1. So you have to
Did
move.
he actually submit the application?
He did. Because the council wrote back to us to say no. We were not giving you the D1.
Right.
So we had to move back. And luckily, Boardman House, for some strange reason, they had their basement, which was there, was also a hall. So we went to occupy that for some time. Then we moved away and we got this property at Upton Park, their banqueting hall. So we went in there at the banqueting hall for a while. Then whilst we were there, we saw this property again for Backcountry. And again, we came back to Alex because...
So hold on. Before you move on to that, what about your congregation? Because you're moving from here, you're moving from there.
So it kept scattering our congregation. Because before, we used to have about up to 500 members. So when we kept moving from one place to the other, then people start getting tired. So it kept reducing the congregation.
Have you had... Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I was saying that's often an issue.
Yeah. So have you had core members that have followed you on the journey?
Yeah,
you've got some core. Yeah. Wow, that is a challenge. So yes, so you got to that place and then you got back in touch with Alex, you were saying.
Yeah, so we got to that place and we got back in touch with Alex. So when we saw that Backcountry property, it was actually for the Jewish people who have just given it to the council, Backcountry Council. So they wanted to lease it for some time. So we wanted to lease and buy. That was our intention anyway.
Sorry, can I ask you? So the owners had actually given it to the council, and you'd gone to the council to get this building. And the council said, okay, you could use it for a period.
Yeah, we wanted to lease and buy. So they just put in, their normal 12-month break clause.
Yes.
So there was a break clause in. And after 12 months, after we've spent a lot of money putting the church, they said we are giving it to a developer to develop affordable housing.
And after, so you're saying this is the second time that you've now spent money?
Second time.
To the tune of what kind of money had been spent, just to show the significance on the
Yeah,
renovation.
it's a lot because, my husband is somebody who loves God. And he doesn't care staying out or giving everything he has just to give something better for God.
Yeah.
So he always do everything to the highest standard. We spent a lot of money. We changed a lot of things. We spent a lot of money. I don't want to really say how much it is, but it was quite a lot. We spent more than 50,000 just to put the building up.
I've seen this happen before, to be honest with
you. So that was how bad it was. And we were able to live in that property, stay in for just a year. Then now council is telling us they're going to give it to affordable housing.
Out of interest, was there any recourse on any of the money? Was you able to say to the council, well, hey, look...
No, because you've got break clause. What are you going to do? So, now it's law. So you have it in. But, some properties, they put that in and after they just still renew it. But they said no.
So all this was happening. Is this prior to meeting Alex?
No. We got with Alex, we got this property through Alex.
Yeah.
So when we got it, and we were still looking to buy, so Alex said, "You know what, Priscilla? Look, your church is a small to medium, and it's easy for you to buy. I'm going to help you get on this one. If it doesn't work out, and whatever happens, come to me. I'll try to help you get another place." So when this happened, we went back to Berlin because my husband had a very good relationship with the owner of the building. So he gave us the banqueting hall again. So around 2019, February. And the funniest thing is that, when these things happen, sometimes after church in the evening, you have to move. So you have to get vans, move your things in the evening to another place because the people are taking their building. So we went to Berlin again. And when we went to Berlin again, we stayed there through to COVID and everything. And unfortunately, the building was an old building and they wanted to pull it down. So the funny thing is that they have put planning permission in there for a very long time. It wasn't coming through. And when we went in, the man went to speak with my husband, and my husband prayed for him, actually.
Okay.
My husband prayed for him. So he loved my husband so much because he's just put in permission for over 5-6 years and it wasn't coming. Then the moment he prayed for him, voila.
He should have put a pause in prayer. He should have said, listen, God, there's a caveat. We need 6 months.
They get, but that building, we stayed in for more than 2 years, 2 to 3 years. So that was a very long time that we stayed in that building for. Then this happened. So we had to look for another property. Then we got the Foxton Road through Alex again. So with that one, we got it from this Potter City people.
Yeah, Potter's House.
Yeah, Potter's House people, yes. And we had a 10 years lease with them. Then my husband is a very persistent man. And he is really determined. Whatever he wants to, because he's just said it at the back of his mind, I want to buy a church. So he wasn't deterred with all this back and forth with, moving, going here and there, spending money. He wanted to get a church for God. So when we went in there to the last place before we bought, he said, before we get 3 years in this property, we're going to buy. And with God and faith and his persistence, it happened.
We'll come back to you on that. I just want to ask Alex something. You must see this story time and time again, right?
It's scary. The only way a church ever gets on the property ladder is for a story like this, bouncing from building to building to building, without the right use or on a flexible rolling lease. And I'm always advising, don't spend lots of money. It's a temporary solution.
So, Alex, when you say those terms like flexible rolling lease, just explain a little bit so that people who are listening.
So sadly, landlords don't want church. Okay, if you have a box which is renting at $100,000 a year with a church in it, that box is worth £1 million as an investment. If it's a gym, for instance, that box at the same gym paying $100,000 a year, that box is worth 1.5. You put Sainsbury's in there paying $100,000 a year, that building's worth £2 million. So from an investment perspective, landlords don't want church because their building's not worth as much. They can't then refinance off the back of it. So firstly, you're already struggling. Secondly, the use out there is very hard to find, and councils don't want to grant commercial use. Don't want to grant F1 use, which is place of worship now, because A, churches don't pay rates, B, they bring noise and nuisance and parking issues. So it's becoming harder and harder. And thirdly, it's got harder because of the change in the use class system. So before it was known as D1, but within D1 you had nursery, you had medical, you had education. Then they created this U class called E class, and literally everything went into E-class: shops, offices, light industrial. But with church, it went to F1, and only in F1 is church and education. So the market's narrowed even more, and it's for every church at the moment looking for stock. It is like pushing a boulder up a hill. It is so difficult, which is again forcing them to take buildings in the wrong use. Short-term lets if you've got a willing landlord, and a short-term let means that site will get developed. So as you say, it's almost impossible. As I've been doing this job for 15, 20 years, it's my bread and butter used to be renting to churches, and now it's not. I probably 10% of the transactions I do are rental. So hard.
Wow. So do you see any sort of light at the end of the tunnel? Do you see any legislation or anything that is potentially going to give people, or is it a mind shift where people need to think about jumping in their car and driving an hour out of town to go to church now?
Well, that's what's happening. I mean, when I started, it was Old Kent Road, and there were probably 200 churches along that short period, and now Southwark literally culled them all, and there's probably 20 at best. They all went to Lewisham, and then Lewisham didn't want them. They went to Greenwich. You haven't got a hope in hell of getting a planning consent in Greenwich now. And now you're out to Dartford and going out to Kent, and that's what's needed. I put something out to my database in Sidcup this morning, and we've probably had about 30 responses on it. So further out, more chance.
Just on that note, I'll come back to you. In respect of churches obviously being dotted around or moving further out and losing members, how do you see that? How's it been in your experience? Because obviously you had at one point 500 members, dwindled down to say 200 members. How does the future look for you in terms of that growth and bringing those members back?
So, I mean, what we've noticed is that the more you are stable, then people tend to know this is my church, it's at this location, and I'll be able to come. But when you keep moving from one place to the other, today you are there. Sometimes some people travel, sometimes people are not around. And when they come back to where, the church was here, and today, by the time I come, the church is no more there, it's gone. But when you are static and you have a place of your own, you'll be able to have the chance to grow your church and know this is my home, because this property is a freehold and it's for us. So we'll be able to grow gradually to hit where we used to be. So that's the approach we're taking now.
You literally can grow roots, can't you?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
So,
and have pride in what you've got and invest in it.
Okay, so let's dissect this particular deal. So, because I think a lot of people want to understand, okay, fine, we all have this dream of wanting to buy a building, but what's actually involved? Most ministers, like I was talking to one not too long ago last week, and he was saying, they've been saving, and, I want to buy $1 million. The problem is they're saving, and as they're saving, the value of properties, the cost of properties are going up. So it's a constantly moving scale.
And rent is coming up.
Exactly. So it's all converging to make it even more difficult. So let's just go into the actual details of that particular deal so that people can understand how it started, how did the money get financed? Because the financing is usually the biggest thing that they struggle with. So who's best to start on that?
I tell you what, first of all, I know, great question, by the way, and it's still part of that, but it's the attitude towards, in terms of the working towards that. Working towards the financing part of it. And then I've heard you speak about this before, so I really wanted to kind of go into that, which is where, we want to buy this church, it's going to be done by faith and God's going to help us. And then all of a sudden the hard talk comes.
Very true. I mean, my biggest advice to anyone ringing me looking for a church is always stop looking. Go sort your finance out. If you're not in a position to have finance, if you haven't got the finance ready, even if you think you get it ready, even if you think, I've got 100 grand, 200 grand in the bank, you're still not ready. You need to be sat with your bank manager or your financial broker and be able to press the button. If you can't do that, it's just going to end in disappointment because someone else would have done it and they would have secured the building.
Okay. So what was your version of starting then? Where did you guys start for this?
But they've been bouncing around, growing and getting ready for this position. The beauty, there was two things. One, your husband, Pastor Sylvester, very, 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 very persistent man.
Exactly.
And was ringing me, this is my building, this is my building. And secondly, and which I really appreciated, there was trust and transparency. So you allowed me to talk to your relationship manager and told him, be transparent. And that allowed me to get comfort and then stick my neck out, because I wasn't the selling agent, I was acquiring on their behalf.
Yeah.
But I could stick my neck out to the agent on the other side and say, these guys will perform. I have spoken to not just the broker, I've spoken to the bank manager directly, and there were questions. So the building, I think, was on the market at 900, if I recall, but because anything that comes to the market in that budget, it always sells above potentially the bank valuation price. So even if you're sitting there with your mortgage offer for 900 and your 30% deposit, that's not going to be enough. You're going to need additional money to make up the shortfall. So that was always going to be the concern. So the agent selling would much prefer a cash buyer because it guarantees or as much cash as possible. So if we'd turned up with that straight mortgage proposal, we probably wouldn't have got the building. But I was allowed to speak to the relationship manager and say, look, yes, they're good. They're asking for 9 and we're offering 9, but hey, it's going to go higher than that. Just will. Supply and demand. What if it goes to $1 million? What if it goes to 1.1? What if it goes to 1.2? Can we still secure it? Is there enough shortfall? And he was able to give me that comfort. And so as I negotiated, I could stick my neck on the line.
What gave him the comfort that he was happy to?
Well, that's between them. But
that's our church finances, because he was a relationship manager and they were bankers. And they know our returns and the monies that goes through the account. So, and they know how organized we were. So they knew that if they are willing to give us 70% LTV, then we should be able to get the 30%. So we were good to go.
You're right.
So that is why he was also comfortable to speak on our behalf.
Right. But surely they would have also looked into the potential shortfalls. Let's say for whatever reason, something happened tomorrow, whatever that was going to be. How was the church? Yes, you may have had certain reserves, but there's still unless you had enough reserves to be able to pay for the whole thing, they're still going to be potentially out of pocket. Or
personal guarantees.
Or did they ask for anything like that?
No.
Okay.
So that is where also faith in God comes in. Aside the fact that we had our finances and everything in order, sometimes when your time is up and God wants to do something for you, he just brings you to the person who will in turn help you to get what you need to get to where you have to. Yes, we had the finances. Everything was in order. But yes, what if something happened? My husband had a plan B because he had his property on the market, a family home that he was willing to sell, which eventually he sold to add to it. But, some banks will be like, okay, so this is your plan B. So the money is actually not here. So we are not going to guarantee on your behalf. Because if, let's say, it's bidding and it shoots to 1.5, what are we going to do? But as I said, when the time is up, even the person who is supposed to talk against you talk for you.
Can I also just say that Pastor Sylvester, he's a character, and I can see why you're married to him. And he does have a way, and he was very, very convincing. And I would suspect some other agents wouldn't have got him, but I understand church and those sort of personalities. But he certainly
they wouldn't have got him. You mean understood him?
Yeah, understood him. Not
okay.
he's just a mad pastor is what they probably thought. He's just kind of preaching down the phone. But he's such a good guy. And what was a pleasant surprise for me was, I think the bank manager was sold how I was sold. Right. I've actually never had a relationship manager ring me up saying, and he was chasing me saying, you've got to get this building for Pastor Sylvester. Yes, we can do this. Oh, we'll work this. And then we were having conversations, what if it values at this and that, and trying to make this happen. It was a amazing connection. So I put that down to Pastor Sylvester.
Yeah, that's why I said he's a very persistent man, and he
sounds charismatic.
He is determined. He's somebody who says, if I want this, he works towards it. He doesn't care if he needs to sell his own personal thing just to get something for God. And because at the age of 24, he was able to build a church for God in Ghana. So imagine, like typical 24-year person is either going to the club or doing other things, but his heart, his whole life in church, love God to the core, and he gives his all. And that is how God also continues to bless him and just keep ordering him and give him everything he needs to get to thrive, to move into the higher heights.
Well, I can say it's going to be inspirational to those who are listening for sure, because I think that's a great test of faith. And as we spoke earlier, also sacrifice, because you're literally laying it all out on the line. Certainly one of the things we'll come to later is some of the additional work that's now being done in terms of, how do we sustain financially what we have? We'll certainly come back to that. But
so I remember you spoke earlier about how much you had to sacrifice to acquire the building. So do you want to expand a little bit more on that? So you
see, we all had COVID, and people were broke. Because during COVID time, church need to give people rent, church need to give people food, and we're doing all these things for our members, and the rent was too huge. So my husband didn't want to put those pressure on his members. He wanted to do something for God. He just wanted to get a place for the financial burden to come off the church. So when this happened, we had to sell one property in Ghana. We had to sell our family home here. We had to remortgage one of our properties to take all this money out to add to get the building and also to refurbish it. So,
Can I just come in? So the rent in the other building, they were paying close to £100,000 a year. Yeah. For a congregation, that's a couple of hundred people. It's almost insane. How is that sustainable? But that's market forces and supply and demand. And I see it. Unless churches cannot afford the rents that are out there, and there's always someone who can do it, but they're doing it because they've got backup funds. But if they do that, they almost hobble themselves in terms of trying to buy a building, because that's what that money should be used for. It's so tough.
Because we spent about more than 300,000 in that property that we were renting for, because we stayed there for almost 3 years. And imagine, the money has just gone to waste. But with this property now, if we even put 500,000 down as deposit, it's an equity in. It's still in. So we have a place to stay. We've secured our money as well, and the money has not gone anywhere. So when you look at the financial aspect of it, this is more viable. Because
it's interesting how it's so viable, but yet it's made so difficult to acquire.
Yeah,
you would have thought that, from a bank manager's perspective and so on, it's like, okay, and even just from a societal point of view, this is what I don't understand, and which is why you can live in a capitalist society, but, the disconnect between having churches and making sure that they are okay. Why isn't there enough focus on policy that is, okay, these guys have a particular use case, so we're going to earmark, 5 or 10% of certain types of properties in these areas must go to F1. So
can I come in with here? So what I think is that it's not just all churches. When you look at Catholic Church, Church of England churches, they don't struggle to get a property because they are the core church in this country. So people who try to struggle at the charismatic and the Pentecostal churches that has now sprung up and are now up and coming. So that is why the legislation, what I think is that they are more focused on this traditional churches, if I may call it that way, with this Church of England, because you can see wherever you go in every district, how many Catholic churches would you see? Big ones. How many Church of England churches would you see?
On every corner.
Exactly.
But they're not looking. Then those churches aren't out there looking for space.
Exactly.
They're all contracting.
That's legacy. That's legacy.
That's what I'm trying to say. So I'm saying that he was saying like what legislation is like, will it be there or maybe the government or whoever, the policymakers needs to put in there to help church. And I'm saying that they do not see it from our perspective because they know, oh, we have this there for this Church of England, because most of them anyway, that's where they go to church actually. So Church of England, exactly.
You say that their churches are on the sort of the diminish in many respects. When you look at the memberships, they're really declining. It's actually more the charismatic Caribbean African churches that are on the rise. You mentioned something earlier about the some of the challenges that come with the charismatic Pentecostals, so on, the parking, the noise, the drums,
you
the
don't
music.
park cars, you abandon cars. Is a phrase I've heard before as you rush to go in and see God. And there's the buildings that you're describing, the traditional ones. They're not actually what the charismatic churches want, really. They come with big burdens.
They can't even afford it.
Yeah, lots of costs. And I'll quote Michael Wyatt of Lewisham Tabernacle. He once said to me, "Al, I don't want a scary Gothic building with a cross on the roof and dead people buried outside. Get me a box." And I always remember that. He told me that about 15 years ago.
Nice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But no, those are all typically the challenges. And I think when you talk about legislation, I think legislation is probably driven by some of those challenges, hence moving it to F1 and making it.
Yeah, but I think the moving to F1 has been a disaster from church's perspective. It is
because it's narrowed us more.
It's narrowed it.
Yeah.
But I think the councils and the local authorities would argue that there's planning policies that it's very hard. So if there's an F1 building, it's actually very, very hard to get planning consent to change it to something else now. So they are very, very protective of what's there, but there's so little there and such hard demand, particularly in the more deprived areas where you actually need church and to be servicing the community. So like the hottest areas would be East London or maybe Northwest London. And that's because you've got all 4 faiths out there. The Muslims are chasing, the Hindus are chasing, the Christians are chasing it, and it's an absolute bum fight.
So would you say, I'm a solutions person, I'm thinking, how is this solved? So is the new path looking for land? I know land's difficult to get.
It's a question I hear every week. Can I just buy some land? It doesn't exist. You won't compete with the developers. They'll see it first.
But what about small pockets of lands? I mean,
but then it'll just be a little new build, a little bit infill from a resi scheme. You just won't see it and you won't compete. You've got to go through the same solutions. You've got to argue that, same planning process, or we're getting a change of views, 2 years marketing to do that. And again, the local authorities, there's such a shortage of housing. They want housing. They don't want a church is going to bring parking.
It's great if a developer comes in and he's going to build 20 units and give 10 of them to social housing or
Absolutely.
whatever.
Yeah, you won't compete. Doesn't exist.
Okay, well, that puts pain to that.
The issue to me, though, is more, it's that 30% deposit. It's simple as that. To get a commercial mortgage, you need 30% deposit. But if you're paying 100 grand a year rent, how do you save that money to get to the 30% deposit? It's a catch-22.
And the prices are going up. And this, so what? How do you manage to deal with that scenario? Because you say, okay, the bank is going to value it at 900. But then there's the actual market forces that are going to drive it up. So when you say 30% deposit, a lot of these pastors are, right, I want to build in. I spoke to them, like I said, I want to build in worth $1 million. At 30%
they've got 100 grand
deposit,
saved in the bank.
Whatever.
Building.
Or whatever. So or let's say they've got 300 there, right? But then in reality, you're actually saying they need a bit more than that because that will get you the mortgage, but then you still need the premium.
And in reality, there will be 20 parties going for that church, and one of them will be cash or 50% cash. So even if you've done everything right, you're still not going to get it, which is the tough thing.
And it's because so many are going for it, hence the supply and demand you talk about.
Yeah.
Now the price has just gone up, so it was $1 million.
Oh, this is what I'm saying. I'm thinking from a like a financial perspective. I mean, you guys have been involved in this, and I guess your antidote to some of that may be, they sold some property and so on and so forth to help get that extra. Because the church finance might just go so far.
Yeah.
And usually, so really, it sounds like the solution is you're going to need some sort of outside independent income, or have saved enough to compensate for. So you're going to need more than 30,
you've got
basically.
like Kingdom Bank and Charity Bank and Stewardship, who specialise in church finance, but they still generally want the 30% deposit. They may move on that a little bit. Where they're getting better is, I always say, if a building hasn't got the appropriate consent, I won't lend the money. The banks will not lend, and the big high street banks definitely won't. But Kingdom Bank has surprised me recently, and they are willing to do it if the funding stacks and the building still value on its own merit, even though it doesn't have the right use, it will potentially fund. As long as they know the church isn't going to be homeless, there's options there, they'll work with you. So
can I just say, are you going to get chucked out if you're a church in a incorrectly classified building?
Potentially.
So what happens?
So you've got to have that with the bank. They've got to understand that if that is a problem, there is a solution there. Maybe you own 2 buildings, or there's an angle there where that won't happen, but the building still values as it is, or maybe it doesn't value. Maybe it's in the value at one level, and if it gets F1, it jumps to another level, but there's still a base value, and you've got enough equity around you. They'll say, okay, we'll fund that purchase. We see what you're trying to do, and if you get it, you get the F1, or you're going to run it as a nursery for now, do something with it. We see it as an asset on your spreadsheet.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask, because there was a real disconnect for me. If I'm a lender and you don't have the right, classification of building, then it's going to be a nervous lend for me.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I've got a part of tea. Deal hasn't happened, and sadly, the main pastor died just before we were about to take a contract, so it's put it on hold. But they got a building in Brixton. They were looking for a which is probably worth 115, and there's an auditorium space, but it isn't church in southeast London, and they were willing to pay close to 3 for it. And I was talking to Kingdom, and Kingdom were willing to do it because they said, look, there's a value there on that building, but as long as you hold your other building, you can rent that out all day long. But whoever goes in there has to have some sort of rolling break. So if the planning goes tits up, excuse my English, but if it goes tits up, we know you can go back into that building and we can play that game.
Yeah. So, okay, so there are solutions there.
Yeah, there are.
Quite flexible. Yeah.
Okay. It was a good segue, but the segue's now gone. You mentioned something earlier, and I thought that's a good segue for us to get into a different part of the conversation. I'm trying to remember what it was. What was we just What was we just talking about before that you mentioned that? You said something. No, I can't remember.
He said a few things.
And you jumped. No, but you jumped in. All right. Well, it will come back to me. Okay. So now you're in this new building, and you are. How are you sort of promoting this building? How are you? Your members are now in there. 6 months, you said. Is it? Okay. And what's been the atmosphere? What's been the sort of mentality of your members? Are you guys doing something? Is there a new energy that's hit the church now that you've acquired? Because this is a major goal, a major accomplishment for them.
It is. And especially in UK, you don't get lots of churches buying their own property. And we also bought it in East London. So it's one major accomplishment for the church. But aside that, members are very excited and happy, and they know they've finally gotten their home that they could call, this is our church. And if they want any event or want to do anything, there's no need to speak to any landlord to make sure we can do this or that, because it is for us. So it's for the whole church members, and they know it's for them. So,
I like what you just said there. I think one of the biggest challenges that I think churches face when they're either renting a building, some are just renting a space for that Sunday or whatever, is the fact that your doors are just not open during the week when people in the community need it.
Would you rent to another church in the afternoon. I mean, a lot of the churches are doing that to subsidise. They do the morning slot, and then the afternoon.
We know about that, but at the moment, we are not exploring that option now.
That's up your sleeve if you need.
So yeah, no. So I mean, in the near future, we'll be looking at probably after school club and maybe nursery or something,
This
or
is a
maybe
segue.
this
is a segue that went out of my mind.
Yeah.
What's the plans, the business? Because we always talk about having a spiritual plan and a business plan. So now you've got your new building. What's the ideas on the business plan?
So we're looking at, as I said, in the near future, if probably an after school club or nursery. We've also got lots of, garages, you know.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
So probably develop it and give it out to rent out. But for now, we've just got in, we've just renovated. We put a planning permission in, which they've just approved. So we will be thinking of developing the land very well because it's got a lot of potentials. And moving forward, we would see how we're gonna, get more income for the church to be self-sufficient. But for now, even just the reduction in rent is giving the church a breather, which is good.
Did your background play any role or input in the church, being able from the organisation, or how the finances run, or whatever or are you totally hands off from all of that? And
so I'm a banker, and I have got my master's in real estate investments. I understand these things, but as I said, and as he also said, my husband, he is very persistent, man.
I didn't see her. We've met.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was all about Pastor Sylvester chasing me every morning.
He
every
is
afternoon.
very persistent. So if he says this is what he wants, he will try as hard as he can to get it. He can come, talk to me, get advice, but he was on the front line. So I'm not going to say I was the person. It was all him. So my husband was on the front line, left and right.
He had your wisdom.
Yeah, he did, because every married man has got his wife's wisdom, actually.
Absolutely. So I was just wondering whether, because it's like a CV, when we've spoken to brokers and they look at, well, who's your deal team? You know, you've got the pastor, you've got the
he's got a lot.
manager,
He's also
Alex.
apart from even me, he's got also a lot of expertise in the church, who also helps and also bring their expertise on board when we need something. So like with the church, one of our members actually saw it, this very one, on Alex's website.
Right.
Then as soon as she saw it, she just forwarded it to my husband. Then the moment he got it, he didn't even sit on it for a minute. He drove straight to check the place up, got in touch with Alex. Then he just told me, let's put a proposal together. So if I'll even do anything, he's the one pushing me. So do this. So he'll tell me, do this, do that, put this down, do this. Then he might not be a banker. He is a pastor, but he's more than a banker. He's more than a broker. He's more than a lawyer. He's a CEO.
He's a CEO.
Yeah, and he's a CEO, and he plays all that role. So he actually, someone might be a lawyer, but he will actually be directing the person, do it like this, do it like that. When you listen to him, you always...
That's what he is.
When is he going to call me and want the 500 or 1,000 seater then?
It's coming soon. But no, just on that point there. So obviously, I want to ask you this question here. Obviously, there was a lot of expertise in and around, and so you were working with people who can-do attitude and wanted to do and had plans and everything already in place. That would have made your life a lot easier. What's the typical situation that you find yourself in when you're...
I think some people think I'm quite hard, but the problem is that there is a reliance too much on God to perform. Okay, and they'll ring me, as I said earlier, if they've got 100 grand in the bank, they think they can afford £1 million building, and as we discussed, you're nowhere near. Okay, so that's the big problem, and then you have to keep giving people negative news. And I spend a lot of time just educate. Go to these guys, go to those guys. Just go and get your advice and sort it out in terms of your funding or your planning advice. All the time, and it takes a while because although I'm from within the property industry, there's not a lot of love and care out there. I tell you, it's all about the fees. Okay, so it's and a short-term gain rather than what's the right advice for a church to get. And so I have a little black book of people who I'll give out, and it's not I'm on any retainer from them anyway. If they've just proven themselves to me that it's not all about the fees, they'll give the right advice, and that's all I do. Just keep giving advice out.
Yeah. So it just popped into my head, and I thought to myself, if somebody wants to, a lot of ministers have this number in their head, £1 million building, let's just say.
It's the worst number, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. So let's define what a sensible number is.
Yeah.
And what the deposit should be, so that people can be out there and hear something and think, okay, well, I need to realign my thoughts and set my targets. So if I want what I thought was £1 million building, I'm actually looking for a 1.5 or a 2, whatever, and I will need this deposit.
Okay. Well, firstly, anything up to £1 million, the market is so strong that your 30% deposit, everyone asks, just isn't enough. Okay, because someone will find the money.
What is enough?
It's got to be a minimum of 40%, in my opinion.
Minimum.
Okay, but it's at a level where someone within the congregation will remortgage their home or do something to make up the shortfall. So someone's going to come up with the cash. So if you're standing there with 300 grand and you got your bank offer, it's just not going to close it. If it's within Greater London, within the M25, As soon as you get to the edge of the M25 and step out, prices drop off and demand gets a lot easier. But within London, £1 million, it's no one can do it. And £1 million now buys you £200 200-seater building, which isn't a lot. No, you get to about 1.5, you're up to 300-400 seats. You're up to get close to 2 million. You're up to 500 seats. Go over the 2 million, you're starting to get to 7, 8, 1,000, 50.
And a lot less competition.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, and that's the difference with the bank valuations as well. Once you get past 1.5 million, the bank valuation is far more sensible. You're not necessarily having to pay a premium.
Right.
Yeah, there's less competition. You say it's a shallower pool. However,
you're still fighting with.
If it's a real unicorn, then you could get 2 cash builders who just go toe to toe. I'm about to take something on in Walthamstow. I'm going to guide 3.4, 3.5 because I know it'll bank value at that, but I suspect it'll go for 4 or 5, another million on top of that. Yeah, it's just a hot area.
And so, in whatever the value is, you're looking at 40%. That's what so. If you're not even there, then
that's what you've got to budget for. It's sad, but that's what you've got to budget for.
Right. Okay. Wow.
And with their building, it wasn't just supply and demand, so they had to pay the premium. The bank's also looking at, wow, it's got an asbestos roof, it's got this, that, you're going to have to go in and change that. There's another 100 you're going to have to make up on the shortfall.
Wow. So,
there's certain things you've just got to do them immediately. Yeah. So you're saying the asbestos.
Yeah, I actually don't think you needed to do that immediately, but I understand you're under pressure to do that.
Yeah. So, that's what I'm saying. It was not just one property that we sold. We sold one property here, one in Ghana, and remortgaged another one. So basically what I think is that if you're a church leader, you just need to be able to sacrifice and also have faith. But sometimes it's not just the faith. When you have the faith, you need to make a step and just sacrifice. Think about your members. Think about how, like, somebody doing cleaning, waking up like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., going to clean and coming to pay offering. Then what are we doing with the money? Using it to pay rent, going down the drain. And because of their faith, they come. So when you have that empathy and you think about your members, then you as a leader, you'll be willing to do anything and everything to help your members have comfort, have a home that they could call their own, and their monies that they give have value.
And the beauty of her story is she's now on the ladder. Okay, there are so many churches who aren't on the ladder, but once you're on, you've literally created legacy. Now it might be 5 years, 10 years before you go to the next building, but you will now be on the ladder and you're growing. That ministry is there for your kids and your kids' kids.
It'll be easier to move up because now if you want to get like 500-seater or 600 in future, when we grow up to that level, all we need to do, we can either give this as buy to let and get a bigger one, or sell it and get a bigger one.
Yeah, you got
because
something to leverage.
it's in London. And the value of properties in London keeps shooting up. So the value that we bought after we worked, the equity that has even added to the money we put in is about 80%. So imagine if you have that business mentality and you know that, yes, it's hard, but if I take the step and I do what is hard, I'm actually going to benefit because the church is actually going to benefit from it. And we are not going to actually throw money away because every money is going to be in. And later, when we grow and we want to go to a bigger place, all we need to do, we've got money stuck in the building.
And can I just jump in on that? So at one point, I get pastors say, I want a 400-seater, I want a 300-seater, but you can only afford a 100-seater.
Yeah.
And you've got to get on the ladder. And their ego, their pride doesn't allow it. Just buy a building, cement, create the foundation, you'll get your 400-seater. And they just don't want to do it. Have your service in the morning, have your service in the afternoon.
Do double service,
Yeah.
triple service.
Get on.
Just to
Swallow
get on.
your pride.
It's like a
That's a good
first-time
one.
buyer in the property. If you want to get, like if you're a new graduate and you want to get on the ladder and you say, oh, I don't want to buy any house outside London and I just want London, then you can never buy. But you can actually buy outside.
Buy a flat.
Because my first property that I bought, I actually bought it in Essex, outside London.
Yeah.
In a year or two time, I sold it, got money, and I was able to buy a house in London. So if you have that mentality, because sometimes you need to step on the first ladder before you can go on the second and the third. But if you just get up and you want to go on the fourth ladder because you think, oh, my members, we are 400, 500, and I need 500 congregation, then I'm sorry, you need about 700,000-800,000 deposit.
You know what? It is about, and this is where the sort of business mentality, which is what this podcast is about. You have to be able to lay out a vision and a plan to your members. So they may think, they may not understand all of what we're talking about here. So they just want to turn up to a lovely building and be able to show their friends, we're going to this lovely church, right? But if you lay out this plan and say, guys, this is the plan. This is where we're going to end up. But you know what? You was talking about, it's going to be, some of you are going to have to come to morning sessions. Some of you are going to have to come midweek. Some of you are going to have to think. So, we don't want to drop the numbers, but we can't all congregate at the same time because we won't have enough space. But if we buy this property and we run it like this, we can then take the next step, in X amount of years or whatever. And I think that is so powerful. What I wanted to also say is, look, and this is something which is maybe a little bit more, not controversial, but it's a mindset thing is, you now are in that position of power. Do you feel any obligation to just help others? Apart from obviously what we're doing here now and the advice, because that is help. But is there some sort of practical way that other churches, like you were saying, renting out maybe affordable rent or whatever, but is there some way that churches that have been able to make it, do they have some sort of moral obligation to help others take that next step, in some shape or form? Can you think of any way where that could happen?
Yeah, by advising your fellow church leaders. So my husband, for instance, most of his friends and the people he speaks to, he can tell you, you know what, I could introduce you to Alex, but you need to do ABC. He's also told people the steps that we took, because he's somebody who always wants to spread everything that he's got. So he's told people, like, when it gets tough, you need to be willing to make sacrifice. Because it's not every pastor or pastor's wife who will say, okay, I'm putting my family home up and give it to God and take the money. And where are we going to live? Where are the kids going to live? So it's a very tough decision.
What
But
did you guys do?
sometimes
You sold your family home. I mean, what actually happened then? What did you have to do?
Yeah, we sold our family home, but I also had a property.
Okay, right.
So yeah.
Downsize, basically.
So like my property was just like a 3-bed house. So we had to just downsize to be able to, squeeze ourselves and give to God, and hopefully
That is even downsizing and having to make that type of sacrifice. For a lot of people, they say what they want, but what are you prepared to do? And I think
that's the whole point.
You need to have
That's
skin
the
in the
whole
game.
You have to be willing to do what most people will not do, or else you can't get there. And that's how it
Takes
is.
a lot of faith.
This is not even faith, because this one, yes, we know God will do it, but you have to have the mindset. when is God going to do it? If God will do it or not, I am willing to take the first step. I will sacrifice. Like the way, even though God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son for him, it was hard for Abraham, but God has asked him, so he did it. And actually, God didn't want him to do it, but God provided. So sometimes you need to be willing to just take the ultimate sacrifice. And also comes to your heart, because God sees our heart. And God knows that, this my daughter or this my son, no matter what, I know he is willing to go to the extreme for me. So he might not even end up letting you get there. But because you don't know what God is going to do tomorrow, because your heart is so with God that you want to do anything possible for him, then he doesn't just leave you like that. He comes through.
Yeah. And I guess that's been your personal experience.
Yeah.
Obviously there are those people who believe by faith and genuinely do take the rough and the good and the bad, and unfortunately it hasn't come through because maybe it's not their time.
Maybe it's not in. That's why I said the right heart. Human beings, we look at what is happening.
Yeah.
So now we are sitting here looking at, they've sacrificed their home to get a building. But do you know what is in our heart?
Yeah.
Maybe we are doing it because, I want to sell my house because I know of what I'm going to get out of the church. Maybe it's genuinely, I love God. So if it's genuinely you love God, then God is saying, this person is doing this for me, not because of what they're going to get out of it, but because of the love they have for me.
Yeah.
And with that, God rewards you.
Yeah.
Can I come in for a practical
sorry, just before you say that, just because this is the practical element. With all of that, there's still got to be an underlying business acumen.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's what I was going to say. So I love the speech and your belief and that power that brings. But the reality is, you took a financial and personal sacrifice, which went into the church, and now you're on a massive foundation for the church, and you are far better off because of it. So that was faith, but that wasn't. That was a practical financial decision.
Absolutely.
And now, from now onwards, I guarantee I'll be selling you a building that no one can get near in 3-5 years' time because you've got that foundation.
It's interesting when it's chicken and egg, isn't it? If you have the genuine, pure belief, then which one spurned on the other. I understand the point you're making, which is if you do things with the right mentality or the right belief, the right heart, then the right people will come toward you'll get, like you said, the people who are talking against you will start to talk for you. So it's an interesting one, and I think this is what makes this podcast so interesting. It's where that sort of cross section meets, and you two are examples of the cross section. So it's really good. It's really good. Normally, so much advice has been given so far. So really, to say, okay, so what would be your advice? We kind of know what that is, but is there something that you feel is, I like to, on our journeys, we always come across things, and it kind of gripes us, and it's like, is there anything, on this whole journey? I know you probably got a whole suitcase full, but that really sort of gripes you, and you want to put that message out to people so that they kind of get it. Is there anything in that sort of space?
I've got one that frustrates me, and I understand it. Lots of pastors are very suspicious of agents and the property market and what their motives are, and are they earning, are they being transparent? And the reality is, most of them aren't. All right. And I'm an agent. I'm commercially minded. I'm trying to earn my fees, but I also have a strong faith, and I'll make sure I deliver you a building at the right price that bank values, and it happens. And I'm going to earn from that transaction. But that paranoia sometimes brings mistrust or a lack of transparency. Now, I can't always deliver if the party who I'm trying to acquire for isn't being transparent with me. So I need to understand their funding. Or I might say, use this lawyer. And they'll go, no, we're going to get our own lawyer. We want it to be independent. Now, I understand why you're doing that in the mentality, but that lawyer's under oath. And I'm only putting forward people because I know they will facilitate the transaction and get you there. And sometimes I feel I need a leap of faith from the parties. Sometimes I'm represented to say, look, just trust me. I'll get you from A to B to C, but you need to follow what I'm saying. And you don't always get that. Or I may be talking to one source, my contact within that church, but then they're taking that back to their board members and their trustees, and there's a whole load of personalities there who don't know me, and we don't have the relation, and it causes problems, slows stuff down, there's mistrust, questions come back, deals collapse. And look, I am commercially minded. I am trying to earn a fee while doing God's work. So they've got reason to be suspicious, but I think the fact that I've been doing this job for 15, 20 years now, and I'm still here. And generally out there, most people say I'm doing a great job and I'm delivering, the business is growing and everyone's behind me. I think I'm doing something right. And again, that word I used earlier, karma, great believer in karma and just doing it right. It's not all about the money. I never obviously I'm trying to do a transaction to earn fees, but it's not about the money. It's about the deal and leaving everyone happy and getting what they want.
Not trying to make money, you're trying to earn it.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go. That's my gripe. I understand why it comes, that resistance comes, but it does get frustrating at times.
Anything that bothers you?
I'm going to say this from a financial perspective as a banker. I think most churches, what they need to do is to have a medium to a long-term plan, because the way the economy is, you cannot just get up and say, I want to buy a building. As I said before, I met him as of 2016, and as at that time, even though we kept renting, going back and forth, my husband has made up his mind, I want to buy. Whether the money was there or not, he's made that mind, I want to buy. And he saw it in the foreseeable future, medium to a long-term goal, that this is where I want to be. So what other people or other churches could do is to have a 5 years to probably a 10-year plan that maybe in the medium to long term, this is what I want to do. So when money comes in, probably open an account for church funds, building fund or something. So no matter what the rent is or no matter what the issue is, you don't touch that money because that money is going towards accumulating to getting a deposit for a building that you want. Then when you also do that, you also have to also look at the maximum you are going to pay for a building. You don't look at the minimum, because when church buildings come, there are a lot of people who want it. And sometimes it's very fun. You don't even fight to just the church people. I mean, mosque people want it, and even the developers. And some people are holding cash. And most people tend to prefer cash buyers because it's quick and easier.
Of course.
So you need to, if you're looking to buy a property for like $1 million or 1.5, budget in your head for like 2.5. So when you do that long-term planning, then you know I am looking at getting at least 600,000, 800,000 deposit down. But you will not be able to get it straight up, but you need to save up for. So if it has to deal with every year doing an annual harvest to be contributing towards the building, when you do and people contribute, you have to actually put the money in that coffers. You don't add it to the church finances, because when you do, rent is going to take it out.
Yeah. Can I just point out something? I talk to one of our clients quite regularly, and one of the things he says to me regularly is, it's the level of transparency that you have with your members, right? And he feels like you can't show them too much, because the moment you show, they see that you have, or that the church has, so on, there's this sort of they start experiencing sort of negative things, whether they are you benefiting too much, or what is the church doing, or you should be able to do this, and it becomes.
No, I mean, I like what you're saying. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think if you're transparent, people are going to think like that. And you have to be transparent to a certain extent. So let's say you have your 5 years or your 10 years plan, and you're doing harvest on an annual basis, and people don't know how much it's in the coffers. People don't know how much you're putting in. Then how? Because people will keep saying, oh, we keep doing harvest all the time and you're not buying the building. What is happening? But if you put it in their mind that, you know what, if it's 5 or 10 years, we're going to have 10 conservative harvest. And every year, if you get 50,000, you name it, 50,000, it is in the coffers. Then you have to get some of the members in to be able to be signatories, or apart from you, the pastor, to be able to manage that sort of funds there and see it's growing up. So anytime you come and do harvest, the next harvest, you come, you let them know we've got maybe 200,000 so far in our pot for building. Then we have maybe 3 or 4 more years to go. So when you keep doing that, then when, let's say, maybe 2 years before, 3 years before, a building pops up and you've got you can get some members who will be actually willing to to loan the church or to help the church get that property because they know the church is going to pay them back. But if you're not transparent, and me, for instance, I'm a member and I keep coming and every year I keep donating money and I don't know where we are, I don't know what is happening, and every year you keep asking me for money, then I'll get
so
to it.
really, it's like, sorry, so I just want to finish that point there because you're like shareholders in a business, and so therefore there needs to be this transparency. That's why I was brought it up. Exactly.
That's why I gave an example. Like, imagine your member is a cleaner, waking up 2 a.m., taking the bus, going through the rain, going to work, and coming to give a tenner or 20 pounds, so pay their tithe every time. And they don't know what the money is being used for. And they don't know what is happening. And church keeps moving from one place to the other because they don't have a building. Or church uses the money just to focus on paying rent without thinking about them. I mean, we are humans. How would you feel? So the leaders have to have that empathy. Some leaders, I mean, it's not bad to actually live a good life because God blesses you when you do his work. But you also have to think of your members. Because my husband, for instance, before church, I mean, he used to close very late and he sat down, he said, you know what? Some of my members need to get the bus. Some needs to get a train. When I finish, I'll sit in my car and drive. So if the train, they've closed, or if there's no bus, how are they going to get home?
Absolutely.
So then he needs to revise his time to be a proper time that everybody will be able to get home. And that is the level that church leaders we need to get to. Think about your members. Not just going to get church. Think about them. Their welfare. Think about their kids. And they themselves too will be willing to also sacrifice and push the church.
Okay, great note to end on.
Yes, indeed.
You know, I think we sum it up: transparency, faith, business
sacrifice.
Plan, all of those things come into it. But no, we really want to thank you guys for joining us today. I'll let you close out.
Yes, indeed. Well, hopefully you've gained a lot and you've learnt a lot from this podcast. Jump down in the comments. Put your questions in there, any feedback, anything you want to know. We'll do our best to get back to you. Follow us on all of our channels. Don't forget to subscribe. And we'll see you in the next episode of Business of Church.